Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Amanda Bakes. Sorry it's been so long since my last video, but we're going to jump in with a great recipe today. I got this cookbook for Christmas, so we'll be trying some new recipes in the coming weeks. And the one we're making today is this orange chocolate ganache tart. So with that being said, let's get started. First thing we need is we've got a blender. The recipe calls for a food processor, but we have a blender. It should still work the same. So we're going to go ahead and open the blender and start adding our ingredients. The first thing we need is 1 1/4 cup of flour, and I'm using gluten-free flour, but you can use flour, like normal flour if you want. So we're going to go ahead and scoop out the flour and add it straight into the blender. We're adding 1 1/4 cup. Because I'm using gluten-free flour, we're going to add xanthan gum. And it's a ½ teaspoon for every cup of gluten-free flour that you use, so we're going to add just over a ½ teaspoon. And then I'm going to go ahead and just stir that together a tad. Alright, there's the flour. Alright, so the next thing we need is a fourth of a cup of cocoa powder. We're going to add that to the blender with the flour. Then I'm going to clean the set real fast. And then we need some salt and some orange zest. So for the orange zest, what you do is you get like a cheese grater and like this one, and then you take an orange and you grate the peel off into a bowl like this one. So we're going to go ahead and add the orange zest first, and then we'll measure out the salt, and if you check the recipe, it's ½ teaspoon of salt. So we're going to add that in the blender with the other ingredients. Then we're going to pop the lid back on and start mixing. So throughout you'll want to pause and stir the sides a bit with the utensil so that you can get the rest of the ingredients, like the flour that hasn't been mixed in yet, down to the bottom. And our blender has a food processor setting, so that's what we're using. Alright, now that that's all blended together, we're going to add some vegetable shortening, which means like Crisco, or you can use margarine, which is what we're going to use. So we're going to go ahead and open up the margarine, and we need 1/3 of a cup. So we're going to take the packet out of the box, and here's one stick. With 1/3 of a cup is 5 1/3 tablespoons. So just about right here, and we're going to cut it like that. Chilled margarine, so this has been sitting in the fridge, so that's good. We're going to go ahead and pop the 1/3 cup into the blender. And then we'll just mix that together. Okay, so now that that's blended together, we'll move on to the next ingredient. But before we do, PSA announcement, make sure that it is fully stocked before you put the wooden spoon in to scrape the sides, because I could have sworn it was, but it wasn't, and there was an explosion of cocoa powder. So just be careful about that. The next ingredient is some ice cold water, and I've had water in the fridge for the past little bit just for this purpose. So we're going to measure out 1/3 of a cup, and then we're going to pour it in the blender and mix that together. Alright, so now we're going to take our blender off the stand to scrape all the dough out of the blender and onto a work surface like a cutting board, which is what I'm using. And don't stick your hand in. Learned that the hard way last time I made something with a blender. So we're going to use the wooden spoon to scrape all the dough out onto the cutting board. You want to make sure you get all of it. Some is stuck under the blades and stuff, so. Stop right there. All on the cutting board. I'm going to kind of just mix it together and get all the little bits of flour that do not get fully mixed in the blender. And we're just going to scrape it all together in the middle. Make sure we can get as much of it incorporated as we can. And then we're going to shape it into a 1/2 inch thick disc in the middle of the cutting board. So we're going to collect it all into a ball, kind of smush it together a bit so it sticks. Then we're going to place it in the middle of the cutting board and just kind of flatten it. You want to flatten it down quite a bit. Make it as circle-like as we can. So right there should be good. So now we're going to get some plastic wrap it around the dough, and put it in the fridge for about an hour. Alright, so while we wait for that to refrigerate, we're going to make some orange marmalade. If you have some at home, great, but since we don't, I'm going to be making some from hand. So first we need a large orange with a good peel, and we're going to use a knife and a cutting board to cut that into 8 slices. So we're just going to cut it in half, and then cut each of those halves in half, which would give us 4, and then each of those, so that we have 8. Alright, so next we need our food processor slash blender again. So we're going to get that, and we're going to toss in the 8 slices of orange with the peel still on. And then we'll food process those all together. Okay, so now that we have mixed the orange peels together, we're going to add in some sugar. We put it in a food processor, which we did switch to a food processor because the blender was not working with the orange peels. So now we're going to add in some sugar, and we need 1 cup of sugar. So we're going to scoop out 1 cup and add it into the food processor with the orange peels. So there's 1 cup of sugar, and now we're going to mix that together. Alright, so now that we've blended in the sugar, it's going to look somewhat like this. And so now we're going to get a glass cup or jar like this one. Alright, so here we have our glass. So we're going to pour this mixture into it, and then we're going to microwave it on high for 2 minutes. Okay, so now we're going to take the marmalade out of the microwave, and we're going to stir it and pop it back in for another minute. So let's take it out of the microwave. Alright, so here we have our marmalade from the microwave, and we're going to stir it and then pop it back in for another minute. And you'll want to watch it carefully so that it does not boil over, because mine did. And you might want to include a larger container than this. So we're going to stir it again, and then put it back in the microwave for another minute, and then take it back out and stir it. So let's go ahead and do that now. Alright, so here we have our orange marmalade, and we're going to stir it and then put it back in for 1 minute, 2 more times total. And then we'll move from there. Alright, so now that we've microwaved this 4 times, stirring in between, we're going to transfer it to this jar. If you use a jar in the first place that has a lid, then you don't need to transfer it. But we didn't. We used a cup, so we're going to transfer it to the jar.
That would have been a good size to microwave it in.
Alright, so we transferred it to this jar, and I've got the lid right here. So once I get the bit of marmalade off the lid, we're going to seal that, and we're going to put it in the fridge and cool it for a bit.
Okay, so while the marmalade is in the fridge, we're going to work with the crust we took out of the fridge. So we're going to take it out of the plastic wrap and move it to a floured work surface like a cutting board. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that now. We'll take the crust out of the plastic wrap and move it to this cutting board, which I've sprinkled some flour over, and we're just going to press it down, and then we'll get a rolling pin.
So now it's been about half an hour and we've taken the pie tin out of the fridge. And so now what the recipe tells you to do is get parchment paper and crumple it up and then spread it over the pie tin and then put 3 cups of pie weights on top of that and then bake it for 15 minutes. And the pie weights are there so that the bottom of the crust doesn't bubble up. We don't have pie weights, so what we're going to do is get a fork and just stab a ton of holes in the bottom of the pie crust because it will have the same effect. It makes it so that the bottom of the pie crust does not bubble up. So we're going to stab it a bunch of times, put a lot of holes in the bottom. It should look something like this. And then we're going to bake it for 15 minutes and then check on it then. So it's been 15 minutes and we've taken our crust out of the oven, and I'm just going to poke a few more holes in it, not super deep, just kind of going over the surface. And then we're going to stick it back in the oven, same temperature, 375, for another 15 minutes. And then we'll take it out then. So while that is cooking, the crust is in the oven, we are going to start making the ganache. So what you need is, the recipe calls for a medium heat proof bowl. I'm using the saucepan because it's basically the same thing, it'll function the same. So we need some chocolate, I have chocolate chips here, some vanilla, and some salt. Alright, so actually we're going to use this as our medium heat proof bowl and use the saucepan for another purpose. So we've got this, we're going to put it on the stove and turn it on to just a low heat for now, about 4 on my stove. It ranges from 4 to 9. So we've got our 8 ounces of chocolate. And then we need a teaspoon of vanilla. So we need a teaspoon of vanilla, and then we need half a teaspoon of salt. And we'll just let that heat in the bowl and mix it together as we go. Alright, so I finally got the vanilla open and I added the vanilla and the salt, and I've got this on my hand so I can hold the bowl in place. And I'm just going to start stirring the chocolate together, as you can see. Move my hand so you can see it better. Just stirring the chocolate together with the vanilla and the salt over the heat until it's all melted together. So I've poured all of the ganache out of the little bowl and into the pie crust. So I'm just going to smooth it out so it evenly covers the whole crust. I'm going to smooth it out with the spoon that you were using to stir. And then after this, we're going to cover it with some plastic wrap and stick it in the fridge for 2 hours. Or what we're going to do for the sake of time, since it's getting a bit late, is stick it in the freezer for 30 minutes and then in the fridge for about 30 minutes. Alright, so we're done chilling the pie crust with the ganache in it, and we're going to leave it in there for just a bit longer while we start to make the topping. So first what we need is 4 oranges. I only have 3, so I'm going to cut them a bit smaller slices. We're going to take the slices and we're just going to cut them, or take the oranges and cut them into slices, and I'm going to cut them into about 6 slices for each. What you would do at home is probably cut them into 8. So actually, I'm going to cut them into 12ths, because I have less oranges. So I'm going to cut them into 6 pieces like this, and then I'm going to cut each of those in half, and then we'll do that with each orange. Okay, so now that I've cut the oranges into slices, I'm going to take them and carefully peel them. You want to leave the orange in the slices shape, but without the peel. So actually what I might do is just cut the peel off with the knife. Very carefully. And you could leave just the edge of the peel so that it stays intact. Yeah, this one didn't work. I'm going to try that again. Alright, so now that we've mixed that together, we're going to set that to the side and we're going to get the ganache with the pie crust out from the fridge. Alright, so here we have our ganache. So what we're going to do is take the orange slices and we're going to carefully arrange them, starting around the edge and overlapping just a bit at the tips. Alright, so some of these slices are a bit thick, so I'm going to use the thinner slices in order to stack them, and I'm going to arrange them around the edge, overlapping just a bit with the others, like I said. And then after we get that row, we're going to do the row in front of it, and we're going to start arranging those slices in front of them. Alright, so we're going to continue arranging the slices until we get all of the way around to the middle. And the marmalade doesn't make for the cleanest presentation, but it still looks pretty good and it'll taste good. So we're going to continue arranging inside the other ones, and it's going for a flower kind of look. So now that I've got those, I'm going to place one kind of in the middle and then a smaller one across from it to give the center of the flower look. And so there you have it. That is how we arrange our oranges. Alright, so there you have it. And before serving, we're going to refrigerate this for another 30 minutes, just in the fridge, not freezer combo or anything. Just refrigerate it for another 30 minutes, and then you can serve it. And so for us, it's pretty late now. This has taken kind of a while, most of the afternoon. So we're just going to leave it in the fridge overnight, because what you would do normally is refrigerate it for 30 minutes, and then if you weren't eating it right away, you just put it right back in the fridge. So we're going to refrigerate it overnight and cut into it in the morning. So there you have it. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed baking with me, and I hope that you enjoyed making this chocolate orange ganache tart with me. And I hope that it turned out well on your end. Of course, every dessert will turn out different, so it won't be the same on your end as on mine. But I hope it turned out well for you. If you enjoyed this video, please go down and like if you want to, and then subscribe if you want to as well, to get the rest of my baking videos. So I will link my social media down below, and I will also link the recipe for the marmalade, and then the recipe for the orange chocolate ganache itself will be on my website, which I will also link down below. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will link the recipe for the marmalade down below, and I can link the, dang it, start on. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed baking with the baby.